Good morning and happy Halloween, everybody. Welcome back to this episode, today's episode, the Halloween episode of the Union Podcast. This is episode 17, Carrie. We're rocking and rolling, and you all are back for the Union Podcast, which is your weekly dose of news, politics, policy, advocacy, polling on K-12 education from the perspective of parents and educators. We thank you all so much for coming back every week for the news that oftentimes gets left behind. We often talk about, in case you missed it, because there's so much going on. If you're an educator and you're a parent, you got enough going on. And right now, Gary, we'll talk about it. It's more than usual. But we also have a special guest today, David Osborne, the legendary David Osborne, author, speaker, presenter, and now documentarian. Is here today. And I'm a little outnumbered. I'm a Jersey guy. I got two Massachusetts folks. Well, David's from California. You got to remind people. Curtis, I'm from California. Folks from Mass. So if you all say something I don't understand, Carrie, I'm like, is that a term you all use in Mass?
Listen, Curtis, we claim him now. And what a wonderful day to have him on Halloween, because we also claim Halloween around these parts. Well, Salem being right here. And I'm from Woburn, right, Massachusetts, which is, orange and black. We just had our big Halloween parade this weekend. All the kids were out, all the schools were out. And we really do it up in Massachusetts when it comes to Halloween.
That is true.
We're so excited to have you here. And Curtis can handle it. Curtis can handle it.
Well, when I first met David, he said one thing. I don't know if you're comfortable sharing anything on the pod, David, but that you've been close to a haunted house in your life. David, do you share that with folks? Or that sort of...
Oh, yes.
Living in a home that was perceived to be haunted. So
yeah, 8 years ago, or 9 years ago now, my wife and I bought a new house. I got remarried. My first wife had died of cancer 20 years ago. I got remarried, and she wanted our house rather than my house. And fortunately, I was old enough to understand that and went with it. So we bought this big old house that because it has a great view of Gloucester Harbor in Gloucester, Massachusetts. But at the closing, the seller's ex-husband asked us if we'd seen the ghost yet. And we had a couple of instances. My wife heard a voice that in the basement there was nobody there. And then we had one of my nieces and her friends visited, and in one room they were sleeping. One of the girls was sleeping, and she said in the middle of the night, this spirit kind of came up the stairs, this elderly woman with a nightgown on, and hopped into bed with her and chuckled, and they went back to sleep. I've never, I'd be the last person on earth that would see a ghost, but.
Oh, David, I'm coming by the house with an evil eye for you to make sure
you should come by the house.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. But yeah, Massachusetts, I'm telling you, we are a hotbed for paranormal activity. When I was a reporter, I was down in Fall River, Massachusetts, the home of Lizzie Borden, where it is believed that her father and stepmother still haunt the houses that she and her sisters lived in. And I don't know, there's something about the energy in Massachusetts that tends to attract a lot of that. There's also a lot of people who are into it in Massachusetts that do ghost hunting and paranormal investigations and all kinds of things. So
don't you dare go to Salem on Halloween, because you cannot move.
That's for amateurs. That's the secret information you're going to leave this podcast with this week. If you really want to see Salem, don't do it during Halloween, because my gosh, it is just a nightmare.
Don't do it in October.
well, Carrie, speaking of paranormal activity, you're in Washington, D.C. seems to be a bedrock of paranormal activity in the last few weeks. And we're going to get to that. But before we do, we want to highlight that one part of David's resume that folks who know David are like, documentarian? What's he talking about? What documentary are you talking about? And we're talking about Turnaround, the story of the New Orleans public school system and how it got to where it was to where it is now, which is one of the top systems in the country for children, outperforming students in the state of Louisiana, and a model that other states are looking at. Dave, let's just jump right in. Let's talk about this documentary. Why did you make this documentary, and what is it about?
Well, as you know, I published a book in 2017 called Reinventing America's Schools that had a number of chapters on New Orleans, chapters on DC, chapters on Denver, and one on Indianapolis, and describing this shift that we're experiencing in some of our urban public school districts, from a district where everything's in the same organization and everybody's an employee of the district to a district in which the school board and the superintendent and the central administration basically contract with nonprofit organizations to operate the schools. And that's the shift that New Orleans made just over a decade after Hurricane Katrina. I mean, basically before Hurricane Katrina, it was probably the worst school district in the country by almost any measure. It was not only 50% of the kids dropped out, 62% of the kids attended schools rated F or failing by the state. I mean, it was rock bottom. And basically, after Katrina destroyed most of the schools, everybody said, we can't go back to the old system. It was also corrupt. I mean, the people were stealing from the system. 24 people got indicted, and most of them went to prison, including the chairwoman of the school board, who took a $100,000 bribe. Anyway, they gradually farmed out their schools as they reopened to charter school operators. And the good ones they replicated and encouraged to grow, and the bad ones they shut down and had that building taken over by a stronger operator. And they've continued to do that. I mean, they have about 80 schools, and they've over the last 20 years, about 40 have been closed for performance. And that doesn't mean the building's no longer used. It means that a stronger operator gets the building in most cases, and the kids, and goes from there. So today, 0% of the kids in New Orleans attend schools rated failing by the state. And for Black students and for economically disadvantaged students, which both are large majorities, I mean, it's 84% economically disadvantaged and about 90% Black. In 2005, they were ranked, their test scores were 66th out of 66 districts in the state. Today, they're second.
Wow.
Both groups, second in the state. And since COVID, as you know, COVID just was a huge blow to urban school systems. And in most of the country, kids are still testing below where they were in 2019 before COVID. Well, New Orleans got knocked way back, but since then its test scores have improved at twice the state rate, and they got to the point over a year ago, where they exceeded their 2019 test scores, and that's very rare for an urban district. So it works. It's the way we used to organize public school systems makes no sense. If we were starting over today, we would never do it that way. And this works much better. So why did I do a documentary? Because I finally realized, sitting there watching wonderful things on television, that in today's world, if you want to change things, you got to get it on television screens.
Yeah, you're right.
So David, can you tell us, you say, it works. Like, what's happening in New Orleans, it works. What is the it? What is the it?
The it is about four fundamental things that have changed. First, the schools, the people who run each school, whether it's one principal or a leadership team, now have the authority to make the key decisions. They hire and fire. They control the budget. They set the schedule. They determine the educational program, the curriculum. Whereas in a typical urban school system, that's not true. Most of that is decided at central headquarters, and the principals are really just administrators. They're not managers in any real sense of the word. They can't hire and fire. They can't control more than 1% of the budget. It's amazing how centralized things used to be. So that's the first thing. Schools have the autonomy, and with poor kids in the inner city, you can't just give them a cookie cutter education. it doesn't work. They're not necessarily motivated. You have to build motivation. You have to go way above and beyond. You have to meet the kids where they are. And you need that autonomy to do all of that. Second thing is accountability for performance. In most urban schools, if the kids are failing year after year after year after year, nothing happens to the adults. A principal might lose their job, but that's about it. The teachers have tenure and they're not going to lose a job. So you get mediocre schools. Well, in New Orleans, if the kids aren't learning, every 5 years, the school is on trial for its life because the charter lasts typically for 5 years. I mean, there are exceptions. If it's really good, they might get 10 years, but most schools is 5 years, and there's a fundamental review every 5 years, and the school might be closed. The people might be out of a job, have to go look for other jobs at other schools. So everybody in the building knows, our performance matters. And you get this sense of urgency that you just don't feel in most urban public schools. So that's second, consequences. The third thing is that families have choices. They can choose basically any school in the system. There are some limits. There's some preference in the K through 8 schools for kids who, I think half the seats are reserved for kids who live within a number of miles of the school. And in high school, they have a few selective high schools, but most of the schools everybody can access. And that means that, and the schools are free because they have autonomy. They don't have to be cookie cutter. There are Montessori schools, there are dual language immersion schools, there are STEM schools, there are classical education schools, there are college prep schools, there's a military maritime academy. I mean, there are all kinds of choices. And so parents and their kids can choose what they think fits best. And if it doesn't work out, then they can change and go to another school. So that's the third big thing, choice. And that also creates consequences, because one reason a school fails is if most of the kids leave, the school doesn't have enough money to operate and it has to close. So the parents have power in the equation, which, as you know, with kids in public school, and as I know, I put 4 kids through public school, you have zero power in most systems.
Don't I know it?
And then, the fourth thing is what I already mentioned, that schools can diversify, that you have a lot of different kinds of choices. So those are the fundamentals. And when you change those things, it doesn't matter whether you call them charter schools, because there are places where there are schools like this that are called innovation schools or Renaissance schools or partnership schools. So it doesn't have to be a charter school. It just needs to have autonomy, accountability, choice, and the freedom to diversify its educational model.
David, someone who's served on a school board for 10 years, every school district thinks that they are special and that what's happening in their school district, in their state, is unique, and that there are not a lot of models around the country that we can learn from. And the work that you did when you were director and I was your deputy, and go around the country to say there are things that we can learn from one another. Let's sit down as colleagues, superintendent to superintendent, school board chair to school board chair. And so when people watch this documentary, they're going to say, oh, this is nice. This is New Orleans. They had a natural disaster. This is a nice story, but what does it mean for me? So what can urban districts around the country who are struggling to get to number 2 in their state with a similar population learn from this documentary and take away from it?
Well, they can learn the stuff I just talked about, the fundamentals that you need to change to get the better performance, to do right by the kids. At the end of the documentary, we point out that there are other cities moving in this direction. I mean, where you are, Washington, D.C., 48% of the kids are in charter schools. And so you essentially have 2 systems side by side competing with each other and both improving pretty rapidly for the last 15 years. Indianapolis, as you know, 61% of the kids are in charters or what they call innovation network schools, which are district schools treated just like charters. They're nonprofits. They have a 5-year contract. But they get district buildings and they get district money, whereas charters get a little less. So there are 30 of those in Indianapolis. And, Curtis, the truth is, if I was starting today, I'd do a film about Indianapolis because in many ways, you're right about New Orleans. People can say, well, yeah, they had a hurricane which destroyed their system, so they kind of were free to start over. True. Indianapolis is doing it gradually, and it's working just as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are we talk about this at the end of the film, that there are other places moving in this direction. And we mentioned Camden, we mentioned Denver, we mentioned the Texas Partnership Schools. So it's not just New Orleans. But what they will learn from New Orleans is what are the fundamentals of an urban district that really works in today's world.
David, I want to get into the politics of this, of course, as well.
Oh, you would.
Anytime you talk about charters, we jump into the political heat because people are really triggered by the word charters, even though everything we just laid out, all of the reasons why this is working, why it's important, why it's focused on student outcomes, and really why it's moving the needle for kids makes sense. Like anybody listening to this conversation is going to be like, this is a no-brainer. But we know that once we talk about charter schools, automatically this is going to be a politically charged issue. But
yep.
It's kind of interesting that we're talking about New Orleans, and now Louisiana really is the center of the universe when it comes to a lot of things on even the federal level. When it comes to education, you have Speaker Mike Johnson. You have the chair of Senate Health, Bill Cassidy, right there. Julia Letlow, who is a powerful voice as well on ed workforce. These are folks who are seeing these powerful examples, like literally at their feet, at their doorstep. And they are actually charter champions and supporters and really excited about school choice. Does that help the equation? I mean, obviously, like we're here, we're Democrats here. We want to motivate folks, but the politics of it are so difficult. And that's why really we've got to have a documentary like this where we can showcase the examples where it's not radioactive, it's pretty common sense, but talk a little bit about the politics of this.
Yeah, well, you would bring up a depressing subject.
Happy Halloween.
In the 90s, first of all, the person who put charter schools on the agenda was the president of the American Federation of Teachers, Al Shanker, in 1988. One of the people who had the most impact in spreading charter laws around the country in the 90s was President Bill Clinton, huge charter supporter. Another huge charter supporter was President Barack Obama. So there was a time when it was totally different and the word charter was not radioactive in blue states. What happened? Well, most charters, the teachers can unionize, but they don't choose to unionize because they're treated like professionals. They have a lot more say in what goes on than in a district school typically. It varies from school to school, of course. I shouldn't generalize too much. But they don't. Only 10 or 15% of the charter schools are unionized. And that's because in some states like Maryland, where Curtis lives, they have to be unionized by law. So as the charter sector grew, what happened to the teachers' unions? They started to shrink. They started to lose members. Now, the people who run teachers' unions have a nice life. The guy who runs the New Jersey teachers' union makes $800,000 a year.
Whew.
Yeah.
Whew.
And the president of the AFT makes $500,000 a year. And a lot of the second line lieutenants in the teachers' unions make a couple of $100,000 a year. And if the amount of dues they're bringing in are shrinking, it's breaking their rice bowls. It's painful for them. So they went to war. And unfortunately, they're good at it. They have a lot of people and a lot of money and a lot of credibility. And they're willing to lie. I'll just tell it like it is. They lie constantly about charter schools. And they spread their money around. They, for example, one of our most respected publications is The Atlantic. Well, they do events. And guess who donates $1 million a year to their events? The teachers' unions. Well, I've tried to get articles about charters into The Atlantic. It's impossible. And they did a partnership years ago with the 74, which is one of our sponsors. And the founder of the 74 told me that the editor said to her, yeah, send us whatever you want. We'll look at it and consider republishing it. But just don't send us anything about charter schools. So they spread their money around to publications. They fund phony research groups at universities that are really just spewing ideology and attacking charter schools. It's really quite nefarious, and they're good at it. And that's why so many people have negative associations with charters, because they've heard all of this propaganda. And
I think everybody here, everybody on this podcast today has some scars on them. I certainly do, from wars here in Massachusetts. Like we've all been through it, and unfortunately seen this up close. And it's heartbreaking, because you can see something that is so good and so powerful for kids. Right there, you can see the solution, and you just can't make it happen because the grown-ups and the politics are so difficult.
And it's been clearly proven by study after study after study that for poor Black and brown kids, charters are dramatically more effective, and they create dramatically more opportunity for these kids. They send far more of them to college. And the teachers' unions are 80% white, and they spend tens of millions of dollars every year trying to limit that opportunity. What is that?
Well, David, what I know to be true, and it happens around the country, is that oftentimes we conflate teachers' unions with teachers. Right,
exactly.
And oftentimes in a lot of local teachers' union races, you may have 5 or 10% turnout.
Right.
And so, so when you ask rank and file teachers, who oftentimes send their children to charter schools in places when they don't even teach there, that there needs to be a conversation around whether they truly represent the interests of the majority of the folks who are working in their districts, who are members by requirement and not by choice.
Yeah, I agree. Very good point. Yeah. Very good. And that's why I talked about the leaders of the unions and how much money they make, because really that's who's threatened. It's not teachers. I mean, there's lots of teachers in New Orleans, public school teachers. And in fact, they have it better in many ways, because if you work for a district and let's say you have a lousy principal and you can't stand them and you want to leave and go to another school, it's very difficult to do. But if you're in New Orleans and that happens, there are a dozen other charter school operators. If you have a good reputation, you're going to get hired just like that, because they need good teachers. So it's choice for teachers too. And that is very empowering.
Yeah. We challenge districts to innovate. When it comes to particularly me and my love for male educators, oftentimes charter schools are more capable of partnering to recruit and retain, have different alternative pathways in the teaching, different ways to compensate. Similarly, you hear me talk about our partnership trying to create more high schools on HBCU campuses, particularly in the South. Those schools are mostly charter schools, because the university and the charter school networks can sort of function outside of the historic bureaucracies and legalities that often hamstring school districts from partnering with higher ed. But as you know, right now, we don't have time to wait.
Right.
These children don't get a do-over. And so this is why this is so important right now. David, those who are watching, want to see this documentary. How can people who are watching this pod right now view your documentary and connect with you on this movement and this message?
They should go to our website, which is Turnaround Documentary, all one word, turnarounddocumentary.com. And they can indicate there that they want to do a screening, and we'll get in touch with them and help them arrange that. In a couple of weeks, we will have it on a streaming platform called Kinema. It's like cinema, but with a K, Kinema. And through our website, people will be able to watch it through Kinema. That's not up yet, but will be in a couple of weeks. And we hope, people will watch it and spread the word, because it's tough. As you know, there's so many demands on people's time and attention. There's so much great stuff to watch on streaming platforms these days. And by the way, Netflix is considering it. Yeah. It's not the kind of documentary they normally run. They do stuff on celebrities and true crime, but we have our fingers crossed. So if anybody out there listening has any influence at Netflix, give them a call.
I don't know. It might fit right in that true crime genre, because what we do to kids in American public schools without these alternatives and innovations and options, it should be classified as a crime. I think in some instances it is. So I don't know. I'm going to use whatever juice I have to advocate for that.
The first 20 minutes of this film is about their system before Katrina, and it was a true crime.
Well, that's a good segue, because speaking of true crime, tomorrow, if nothing else happens, we're going to hit a cliff in this country, sadly enough. And the people who are going to be hurt the most are going to be the students and educators and people that we say we care the most about. And Kiera, you've been following this. You've been in the, beating up those the hallways of Congress, because right now our leadership at the federal level is not operating in our interests. Tomorrow, if nothing else happens, tens of thousands of children and families could be affected by dozens of Head Start programs closing. About 134 programs across 41 states will see their operational funding ceased tomorrow. That's affecting 65,000 kids, or 10% of all Head Start children. Florida, Georgia, Missouri, and Ohio may see the most impacts, potentially affecting more than 24,000 children and over 7,500 staff, Carrie.
And Curtis, don't forget, these Head Starts are the #1 providers for special education for early childhood in America. Like, these are the kids directly. You really want to double click on this thing. Like, if we're just talking about Head Start, like, this is going to be a catastrophe. These kids need these services and they need the support. And I'm a former Head Start mama myself, and watched how it helped my children when I was a young single mom, trying to make sure that they could find their way. And the investment in my kids, I can see it today when they are in 7th, 8th, 9th grade, the jump start that they got on their education and literacy and all of these other things. These are critically important programs, aside from the fact that this has a detrimental impact on American families, because we got to work. We are the backbones of the American economy. And frankly, in places like where David and I live in Massachusetts, the cost of child care is astronomical. And part of the beauty of the Head Start program is not just the educational foundation it gives to kids, but it gives us the ability to work, to go out and provide for these kids, to have a safe place, and frankly, a place where they are learning. And many of us, I know myself, I had to turn to a family home daycare that probably wasn't teaching them the best, academic preparation that they need, that we know is critically important during that very important window before they enter kindergarten, so that they're well prepared to get in there. And it was a blessing when we finally got that spot. Specifically, I'm thinking about my Miles, who was actually having some difficulties with speech, and what they were able to do with him turned everything around. And I'm not that unique. There are families across this country that are going to be thrown into chaos as the result of just that.
And so we'll be monitoring this over the next 24 hours, hoping that by the time we come back next week, that the federal government has addressed this issue, has reopened, because this is going to affect the families that need the most. This is coming on top of the potential for SNAP benefits being cut throughout the country tomorrow as well. So we're talking about nutrition, food, and now early childhood development. This is all happening just in the same amount of time that the Department of Education, idea to want to cut special education employees was been blocked by a federal judge. And so you have the Department of Education cutting staff that are, really addressing, special needs. You have Head Start that disproportionately impacts students and puts them on a pathway for education. And we all know that early childhood piece that idea that early child is the best investment in education. Every $1 you put in early childhood, it's a $7 savings plus nutrition. All this is happening at the same time. And I know you all are watching the news. You're wondering, Curtis, how do I triage what I'm hearing? This is why you come to our pod, because we keep you informed of what's happening, and then ways that you can get engaged and respond. We're almost at time, Carrie.
Yeah, I got to call folks to action right now because I have been down in Washington, D.C. all this week. I was actually originally down there for a very exciting and positive thing, which I got a phone call from Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri saying, you got to come down. I'm finally going to push forward with this legislation that would ban AI chatbots from kids under the age of 18. And I was so excited to get that call and to stand there with our parents. And some of whom were victims of unfortunately, these AI chatbots that are unregulated and are really attacking kids. And it's a really difficult situation. Was thrilled to be down there with him, but I was not going to let an opportunity, meeting with him, with Katie Britt of Alabama, with Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, Chris Murphy of Connecticut, and a whole host of other senators. I went right in there and said, we've got to do something here. We at least need a stopgap measure around SNAP. I'll tell you, this is something that is a crisis, not just for us as Democrats saying, are you guys crazy? We've got to make sure that families are fed. But Republicans really understand this. And I looked right in Josh's eye and I said, you got to fix this. He actually has a bill that now we were able to apply some pressure to Chuck Schumer to get everybody kind of behind one piece of legislation. But the fact of the matter is, unless Leader Thune is going to schedule a vote and Mike Johnson is going to get this scheduled in the House, it's going nowhere. And so that comes down to putting pressure on members of Congress. And that means what you need to do right now. If you have 2 minutes, you can pick up the phone, call your representative in the House. And what they're going to do is they're going to hear from enough of us and they're going to start stomping their feet in front of the speaker saying, we have to do something. I'm under too much pressure here. So call your member of Congress today. Say, we want action on this. There is a bill that is in the Senate right now that even, Democrats and Republicans have given their blessing to. If we could get that off the ground and moving, we could at least have a stopgap around SNAP, around WIC, and make sure that people are going to get fed and hungry kids are not going to be suffering over the next several weeks.
Well, there you have it. For those of you all who are, today's Halloween, and we know that you have a lot to do. But before you do that, again, 2 minutes to reach out to your representative, whether you're in the Senate or the House, or both, hopefully, to ensure that we address this as a community, as a nation, because right now our children need us the most. We're at time. We want to thank you all for joining us today for the 17th episode of the Union Pod. We want to thank our special guest, David Osborne.
And I want to thank you for having me.
No, thank you. For those of you who are wondering, again, turnarounddocumentary.com, turnarounddocumentary.com. Please watch. Thank you for watching today's pod. Like, share, comment. Let us know what you thought. Let us know if you want to connect with David Osborne. We can connect you. Let us know you want to connect with the National Parents Union and what they're doing to ensure that children in this country are not left behind. Any final words, David, before we let you go?
No, I just am really appreciative that you have me on, and it's always fun to see you, both of you. And Carrie, we got to have lunch again.
That's right.
Well, everybody, thank you all for joining us. See you all next week. Same time, same place.